Joe Pike.
Lord Koonsberg.
How nice to be with you on this very hot day.
Very hot day. Just the sort of weather for an essay crisis.
Or just the kind of day to stay inside and read tens of thousands of words written by politicians.
Which is what students do and school kids do all the time. That's when the exam season is, I suppose.
I suppose that's right, studying in the park. Well, we have all, and everybody in the political world has been doing quite a lot of studying this week because not one, not two, but three politicians decided that the best way to communicate with the world at large was to write some very long pieces of texts. I haven't seen that for a while.
No, Tony Blair, I think, wanted on Tuesday night or Wednesday morning to provoke a debate, and I think he's certainly succeeded.
It's certainly what he's done. Lots of discussion of Tony Blair's essay this week with Adam. Lots of discussion too of Andy Burnham's riposte to Tony Blair in the newspapers as well. But we're going to talk today about, weirdly, one of the maybe under-discussed of all of these essays, the essay from the current Prime Minister, who joined in with his Substack. And to do that, we'll be talking to one of his former directors of communications as Keir Starmer tries to fight back. All on this Saturday's episode of Newscast. Hello, it's Laura in the studio.
It's Joe Pike also in the studio.
Now, before we introduce our guest, can you actually remember something like this happening before?
I can't know, but it does feel a bit sort of mid-noughties and the advent of the blogosphere, when everyone had a blog and I would write a blog responding to your blog and everyone was talking about blogs, and seemingly we are sort of getting a bit of that now in the media ecosystem with Substack. Substacks are becoming a big thing. And Keir Starmer actually wrote his riposte to Blair and Burnham and Streeting and everyone else on Substack.
And if you're not the initiated, Substack is essentially, it's an internet platform where anybody can write something, long, short, whatever they want, and essentially have it published online in quite a sort of snazzy way. And you're right, it is kind of all the rage for, I suppose, thinkers. Some journalists have them, some celebs do them, some politicians do them. So, check out my Substack in the way, as you said, people might 20 years ago have said, oh, sign up to my blog here. But now you might say for something that comes with pictures and little bits, look at my Insta. But if you're trying to be a thoughtful, clever person and set out ideas, Substack is somewhere where there is an awful lot of debate going on about all sorts of things. And you can make money out of it.
In the creator economy, where people are not being parts of big organisation necessarily and being on YouTube or writing on Substack, there is a way to make money from it. I don't think Keir Starmer is planning to make any money from this quite long intervention response to Tony Blair. And also, it's quite hard to find out. I certainly haven't found out how many people have read it. Presumably, he's not too worried about everybody in the country, more concerned about Labour members and MPs.
Indeed. Well, let's talk about what he was trying to achieve with James Lyons, who was Director of Communications under Keir Starmer for a while. James, hello.
Good afternoon.
Now, just before we get into the substance of the Substack, just give us a bit of context. When were you in Downing Street and what was going on around the time that you were in Downing Street?
Sure. Well, I think Joe is right. We're kind of in a bit of kind of fire up the DeLorean moment here, aren't we? It's not just the kind of way that the message is being communicated. It's also some of the players who are on the pitch. So you've got Tony Blair, Gordon Brown's been out recently, Alan Milburn's been in the headlines, Jack Straw and David Blunkett have been out. It has been a real kind of, am I mad in a coma or back in time moment. But look, I was in Downing Street for a year. I went in October of 2024 after the difficult start that the government had, and they got me in to basically try and sort out the strategic communications, which I did.
And you seem to be going through the door just as Sue Gray was coming in the opposite direction, James. So presumably you entered Downing Street where there already was some sense of maybe mistakes being made.
Yeah, it was it was deliberate reset. There were a number of kind of personnel changes, and actually, we we had a few good months. So if you remember, we launched the Plan for Change then, which took these kind of sprawling 10-year missions that Labour had in opposition and turned them into an actual plan for government and what the government was going to deliver in the first term. And for about 6 months after that, people kind of knew where we were heading. It provided some clarity and some focus. Then the local elections hit and, things started to go awry.
So, James, just before we get into this then as well, I think it's also interesting and important for people to know that before you did that, you were a political journalist. We were in the lobby together a long time ago. You were a political journalist for years and years and years. And then also
Years
you were...
and years and years.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, I know. We are both quite old now. No offence
Although
intended.
it's nearly 10 years since I left, so I'm nearly 10 years clean.
Well, what I was going to say is
Clean.
then you were
The
working...
insult.
What I was going to say, though, and this is, I think, interesting to this conversation in a sense, because then you were working at one of the big social media platforms. So you've got a kind of 360-degree view on comms, as people would call it, and comms in the 2020s, right?
Well, very kindly say so. Certainly, been around a long time and done some interesting things. And it is fascinating, right, that in a time when the kind of main medium is short form video, that we sort of had 3 or 4 politicians picking up their quills in the last week to write to each other. And in my head, when I've been reading them and rereading them to speak to you today, I had in my head the kind of voices of Prunella Scales and Patricia Routledge in Radio 4's Ladies of Letters, because there is that kind of passag tone to a lot of what is going on.
Oh, that is so true.
Who's Prunella Scales in this? Tony Blair, Andy Burnham, or Keir Starmer?
I think it may be Wes. Who knows? I mean, I thought the line I loved in the Prime Minister's riposte was where he went on about, obviously Tony Blair, Labour's great election winner, and quotes, "It usually pays to listen to him."
Oh, quills at dawn. So, why did you think that they have all done this? Because it is unusual, as Joe and I were saying. And, would you ever have said, I know what we need now to really get things back on track, Prime Minister. Sit down at a keyboard and type out 5,000 words or whatever it is.
Well, I mean, it's fair to say that this isn't the first Substack. They launched the Prime Minister's Substack some while ago. And I actually think it was a really good idea, in the same way that, I was working with the new media unit during my time in government, and we were sitting the Prime Minister down with creators, so that he was speaking to, and I think it was one of my favourite pieces of comms while I was in there, and I can say this because I had very little to do with it. When Universal Studios announced multi-billion-pound investment in Bedford, in amongst all of the traditional media we did, the Prime Minister spent 10 minutes chatting to a guy who reviews roller coasters on TikTok. And that is going to get you to a whole audience you would never capture through government channels or traditional media. But what Substack does is it allows you to talk to the kind of politics-heavy community. So you've got the people who are politics light, you can reach through the kind of social media piece. They don't follow all the kind of ins and outs in Westminster in the way that the 3 of us rather sadly do. But you did then have the party activists, MPs, ministers, people who are interested in politics, who will kind of seek out something like this. And this was very much made for people who are politics heavy.
So what's he trying to say then? I
mean, he's trying to say, I'm not going anywhere. That's the number one message that you have to take from this. He does admit some mistakes, and he also, very interestingly, does say that the government has asked a lot of the business community in the form of the employers' NIC's rise. But he goes on to mount a defence of his government, and he lists what he sees as the achievements, things like falling waiting lists, knife crime, help with childcare. He does this just before he says that government isn't a tick box exercise.
It's just tick lots of boxes.
Tick box exercise. But then he does go on to talk as well about what motivates him. Not enough, I don't think. But I've always thought one of the keys to the Prime Minister is his family's experience, and he talks in this piece about his brother Nick, who, as he says, had learning difficulties and had to really fight to be seen.
There's also, James, what we might term as an excuses section and a regrets section. The excuses, he's talked about, we've had the worst inheritance since at least Thatcher in 79, although of course it was an inheritance from Callaghan, from Labour there. And in terms of the regrets, he talks about being too negative early on, about the winter fuel cuts, the national insurance rises, all of those really seem to be effectively Rachel Reeves is doing. Talking about the sort of subtle drive-bys in these long pieces, Rachel Reeves doesn't come out very well from this, does she?
Well, look, at a time when the main problem the government has is a lack of growth and a lack of money, the Chancellor is going to be put in a difficult position. And I would argue, actually, some of the problems stem from the fact that they didn't do some of this stuff early enough, and they certainly didn't mount an argument. So winter fuel, nobody objects to the principle of means testing winter fuel. I think you would struggle to find anyone in this country who thinks that Alan Sugar deserves a winter fuel payment. But what they didn't do was, well, they made two mistakes. One, didn't argue the case for it, didn't set it up with, a kind of independent commission or anything in the way that we've seen Pat McFadden do on kind of a help for young people this week with Alan Milburn. And then they set the cut-off point too low. And the reason that they did that, I wasn't around at the time, is because DWP told them that the computers could only cope if it was at kind of the pension credit level or at one of the kind of tax bands. Obviously, that turned out to be wrong when challenged later on, but that's why they ended up going too low.
And it took them a long time to do it as well. The U-turn was 11 months after the original policy was out. That does seem particularly bad because by the time Rachel Reeves had U-turned in June 2025, it was 2 months after Reform got in a lead in the opinion polls in terms of Westminster voting intention, and have been in that position ever since.
It was a terrible U-turn, terribly executed. So I can speak frankly about this because somebody leaked my views while I was sitting in Downing Street. And I kept trying to explain internally that nobody was going to get any credit for this U-turn. And actually what you needed to do was think, what would Gordon Brown have done? And I'll tell you what I think Gordon Brown would have done. You had the winter fuel payments for pensioners, and the pot for that had obviously shrunk a lot. Then you actually have help with fuel bills for low-income families. I'd have just mashed it together into a new benefit, given some more money back to pensioners, called it something completely new, and claimed it was a huge success.
And why didn't they listen?
Well, apparently that was too difficult.
But was that because the political will wasn't there and it was too difficult to suggest something new and complicated, or was it because officials were saying, "Oh no, we can't do that"? Because we've heard it a lot.
I won't go into the details, but it didn't happen, and the government got no credit for it. What it did was what a lot of us in Number 10 feared. It basically persuaded Labour MPs, mutinous Labour MPs, that there was a magic money tree to reverse the welfare cuts. So it poured petrol on the welfare rebellion.
Was there another issue as well here, to be fair to Rachel Reeves, that is sort of never really spoken about, that she announced this policy on the same day as the Southport murders? So that horrific crime and the fallout from it in terms of riots and unrest across the country meant that maybe Number 10 didn't realise there was this sort of low rumbling backlash because there was a much bigger, more distressing, emotive news story in the headlines.
I mean, I don't think that while the attention on the day was obviously on those horrific crimes, I just don't. I mean, looking from the outside, when I heard that policy, I knew immediately that there was going to be all hell was going to break loose around it.
But it took 11 months to U-turn. So, I mean, I say that point, James, because I remember talking to somebody at Number 10 not long after Rachel Reeves had made that announcement. And they weren't referring to the other news at all, but they were saying, a couple of weeks in, we think we've sort of got past the worst. There's not been as much of a backlash as we think. And you can sort of trying to work out why they were thinking that. Maybe this played a part, but it does just seem startling and maybe indicative of the way Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves work. That what you say you spotted immediately, they really didn't.
Well, for whatever reason, and I can see how it would have happened. The Treasury officials would have greeted the new government at the door and told them that we're on the kind of brink of some kind of Greek-style, financial meltdown if they didn't act quickly. And here are some options. So I think that's probably what went on there.
It's really interesting, isn't it, to cast back, because there are so many things that went wrong for a government in its early months when they had come in with this enormous majority and enormous opportunity, but they've ended up in this position where Keir Starmer is finding himself point by point almost rejecting the criticisms of Labour's most successful ever leader. I just wonder, James, what do you really think is going on here inside the Labour Party? Is this just all a kind of warm up for what might be a leadership contest that's going to be a debate that runs on for the next few months? And that's why Tony Blair wanted to get kind of his version of the Labour Party out there into the public domain. And then Andy Burnham stepped in. Like, what is this really all about?
Well, I find it absolutely fascinating what Tony Blair thought he was going to achieve. And look, I'm a big fan of Tony Blair. He's a little bit left wing for me, but apart from that, he was a great prime minister. But it does seem a really counterproductive move here. I think who are the winners? Maybe Andy Burnham a bit, possibly West Streeting. You could put a conspiracy theory together that says Tony Blair did this so that West Streeting could come out and criticise Tony Blair and try to endear himself to bits of the Labour Party that aren't very endeared to him at the moment.
Well, that's right. That's why it's so interesting, because this is a big power play, isn't it?
It is Saint Tony the healer. He's brought all these people together and united them in saying that he is wrong. And I'm not sure that if I was Pat McFadden, I would have welcomed his intervention on welfare this week, because I think it will make it even harder to sell to reform to Labour MPs. But I think what you're seeing is a kind of howl of frustration, actually, from Tony Blair. And I think he probably feels that private messages haven't got through. His institute have been talking about doing away with the kind of net zero agenda, for example, for a very long time. They produced previous reports around that, and obviously that has not thus far gained traction inside the government.
It's so interesting, isn't it? Just wondering what went through his mind, because it's worth telling newscasters this is the first big political intervention that Tony Blair has made deliberately in this government's lifetime.
Almost 2 years.
And it's not for want of trying. I mean, I'm sure I will not be the only journalist who has asked Tony Blair and his team a million times, say, will you come on and talk about this? Will you come on and talk about the government? Will you come on? And he's done some very carefully written newspaper pieces, particularly on things like artificial intelligence. He's done some joint pieces with William Hague, and the kind of, here we are, two former elder statesmen. But deciphering and trying to decode why this has been the moment is really interesting. And you wonder, he thinks, look, there's going to be a debate about what Labour's for. He doesn't want the next job to go straight to Andy Burnham. He made the point very clearly. He thinks, hypothetically, it's crackers to be changing Prime Minister as often as this country has been doing it. But who the beneficiary of that will be, it's really, really hard to tell.
But he did say, when questioned on the day that his piece came out, why are you doing this? One of the arguments he made was we need to talk more about policy and less about politics. And to be fair, if you do read all of these pieces as I have, including the Streeting one and the sort of Kemi Badenoch open letter to Blair, they do talk about policy a lot. And the fact that Tony Blair is advocating, or not necessarily advocating for, but questioning the existence of the triple lock on the state pension, and the conversation we've had about winter fuel payments and what is sustainable long term, it has brought some of these key arguments that people behind the scenes have been having for years. And that, to be fair, I think anyone who wants to be Labour leader might want to, for now, keep away from, because they're just too knotty and controversial if you want to win an election.
But Andy Burnham, James, go.
We can come on to the merits or otherwise of some sort of battle of ideas in the Labour Party while it's in government in a minute. Personally, I think it would be a disaster.
But I wonder also if really what we've seen is, James, as you say, a bit of a howl of pain from some of Labour's past greats, that this government has not got a track record of using a once-in-a-generation enormous majority well. You know, only governments with enormous majorities, arguably, can do big, hard things. And you can hear it from Tony Blair very clearly. I think you could hear it from Alan Milburn slightly less clearly, that there's a deep frustration that this government didn't come in. And as the government did in 1997, came in and very quickly did some big, bold, radical things. Love them or hate them, that did happen in 1997. And this government is still in the position on all sorts of things, whether it's young people, whether it's social care, doing reviews, looking at policies, thinking about policies, welfare, not having a reform of that in the King's Speech. And I just wonder, James, you know, as a keen observer of the Labour Party, where do you think that level of frustration with Keir Starmer's government is sort of sitting on a frustrationometer, you know, out of 10?
Sorry, with who? With the public or with...
Within the party?
Oh, right. With the sort of travelling Wilburys who popped up over the last few weeks. It's fairly
like Stones,
high.
still on tour.
Some of the old stages, although I have to say, you know, Tony Blair's, I think, almost twice the age that Tom Petty was when they got together. Look, it clearly, one of the problems for the government is there's a huge amount of frustration within its own ranks, right? You know, people within cabinet, ministers, MPs, and in and party activists. So yeah, I think it's pretty high.
And the problem, presumably, as well for Keir Starmer, if we take a step back, he can write his long response to Tony Blair and take those sort of subtle swipes at Blair and others. But Tony Blair is the longest serving Labour Prime Minister in history. And all the signs so far are that Keir Starmer is going to be the shortest serving Labour Prime Minister in history.
James, can you see a situation, if Andy Burnham wins, that Keir Starmer stays as Prime Minister?
No.
Can you see a situation?
And I think if Andy Burnham wins in Makerfield, there is a very, very strong chance that he will be in Downing Street before the summer recess without a leadership contest.
And if Andy Burnham does not win in Makerfield, is there a chance, do you think, that Keir Starmer can stay as Prime Minister in that circumstance?
There is a chance, yeah. There is a chance. I don't know how big that chance is. I think there will still be an attempt to unseat him. I think, frankly, if Andy Burnham can't win Makerfield, there are some very fundamental questions about whether the Labour Party is still a viable political vehicle.
And talking of Makerfield, Robert Kenyon is, of course, the Reform UK candidate. And there's a full list of all the different candidates on the BBC website.
I think it's time. I've been waiting to say this for ages, and I haven't said this on air yet, and I'm going to say it now. Could it be Makerfield or Breakerfield? It was only a matter of time. James, enjoy the sun.
I feel privileged to have been there to hear that.
I think you could have a job as a sub on a tabloid newspaper, I think.
That would keep me out of trouble. James, thank you very much indeed for joining us on a sunny, hot afternoon. We'll let you go off out into the sunshine or get on with reading essays, perhaps. Thank you.
Thanks,
Champions League.
Oh, of course. Yeah, well, that's going to be a huge story, isn't it? Well, James, thank you very much.
Tomorrow, Laura, it's Sunday. Anything worth watching on your show?
Oh, well, someone that you know quite a lot about because you've written a book about. Oh, Nicola Sturgeon, ring any bells?
Yes, this sounds like a major coup and scoop of an exclusive interview.
So this morning, Nicola Sturgeon agreed to do a very long interview with us.
How long?
Nearly an hour. And tomorrow on BBC One, on Newscast, all over the place, we will broadcast Nicola Sturgeon's first full interview about the very serious financial scandal which engulfed the SNP for years, which will see her husband likely to be sentenced to a jail sentence. Peter Murrow pled guilty this week to embezzling £400,000 from the Scottish National Party. And up until now, well, she's always denied that she did anything wrong. Nicola Sturgeon has not spoken at length about what she knew, what she did, and what she thinks of her former husband. And we had a long conversation and covered all of those issues. I would say she is emotional, but defiant. And don't miss it tomorrow.
That's a pretty pretty good trail, pretty exciting tease for tomorrow. And it is one of those stories that has this week, even if I think UK-wide people didn't know much about Peter Murrell, it really has captured the public imagination far beyond politics, because it's sort of about relationships and family and what you know about the person you share a
and
house with.
motorhomes, and how can a pepper pot cost £3,000? I mean, you're right. This is also just it's a huge story, and it's a huge issue, and not least because she was one of the most powerful people in the country for years and years and years, and she's also somebody who many people really looked up to and admired. Nicola Sturgeon, and her political career ended in a very painful way. There are also other people who have always found Nicola Sturgeon someone that they cannot get on with. And so she was hugely admired by many fellow politicians. I mean, even during the Brexit years around Europe, she was seen as a really talented politician, without question, one of the most talented politicians of her generation. So that's one of the reasons why this story has become so huge. But it is a real mashup of the political and the deeply personal. And she talks about all of the aspects of what's happened in our interview that will be across the BBC tomorrow.
Oh, excited to watch, listen, all of it.
Will we be reunited tomorrow?
Yes.
Excellent. Well, enjoy the rest of your Saturday. Thank you, newscasters, for being with us this afternoon. And we will look forward to speaking to you tomorrow.
Let's get to the football, Laura. Quick.